Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. So grateful to be here live at Buddy Brew on Kennedy with a beautiful room filled with wonderful people who have turned out tonight for an incredible celebration. We are here to celebrate the inaugural poetry collection release from poet Wendy Kieffer, who is releasing, you can clap for that. I told you there's a live audience. Already number one in Amazon's rankings of new releases for today. Hers went right to the top of that list. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff Bezos and all the other booksellers. And already number one new release for poetry. And you're going to hear why in just a moment. But Alchemy of Praise is the brand new inaugural collection from Wendy Kieffer. Wendy is a poet. She is a mom. She is a bright light in the world. If you know Wendy, or if you've heard her on Lab, the podcast before, you know the depth and richness of understanding, but also heart that she brings into the world. And it's why we are so grateful for this collection. It is going to, as Lewis said, irrigate the desert. There's many of us who in this moment right now just long for something rich and meaningful that will slide directly into the moment that we are in. And I know that you are facing them, we are facing them, whether it's tragedy or heartbreak or tension or anxiety or the big celebrations of life. It's all, as we say, commingled. Yeah. And poetry has a way of going right into that moment and meeting us there and widening our imagination. And we couldn't be more excited. So Wendy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Zach. It's good to be here. I'm super excited.
Excited is a word.
Yes.
I want to know the word under the word. How are you feeling about the release of your book?
I keep making the analogy that it feels like I'm bringing a baby home from the hospital because it's a labor of love. It's overwhelming. Yeah.
I feel that we have the privilege of interviewing lots of authors, lots of people who are releasing music or visual art or poetry. And I love to ask, did you imagine this moment? Some of them, it's a first project. Some of it's a third album or fourth album. Mm-hmm. Growing up, did you imagine a space like this where you would literally be holding, I think they say it's 1% of people publish books, right? A lot of us, not as many of us are gifted at writing poetry, but some of us write at home. But it's another thing to put that art in front of family and friends. It's another thing to put it out publicly and invite people to look at it, rate it, review it, engage it. That's a different thing. Did you imagine being in this moment holding a work that you curated?
I think I always knew that I wanted to publish, at least in my adult life. But if I trace back to childhood, I was always in theater and dance. I mean, always the arts. But yeah, no, I think it kind of caught me by surprise, but also made sense when I looked back. Yeah.
If you could go back and encourage your childhood self for this moment right now, what encouragement would you have given yourself back then, knowing that this would be where you would end up?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I feel like my parents did a good job of encouraging my artistic senses. They never said, "That's not practical. What are you doing?" I think they gave me what I needed. And I love this one memory of me. My mom used to put me in beauty pageants. My brother and I it's like what you did in the 80s, I guess. And I was Little Miss Florida Sunshine. I know.
Yes.
Thank you. But I went to the regionals or the whatever, and my talent was reading and reciting an original poem, and it was called The Gift of Beauty. And I look back on that and I'm like, okay, wow, it's on my mom's wall, the whole poem is written out. And I feel like that yearning and hungering for beauty and for meaning and for sharing that in a public way, that was, I don't know, I guess that talent was right on. Go mom. She knew, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Hey, moms know. And I know there's young people in the room here, young people going to listen to this, parents who have young people at home. And here's what I will say. We watched this, I don't know how many years ago it was, 4 years probably now, where Amanda Gorman took the inaugural stage at the inauguration of the President of the United States. And you watched the power of poetry in that moment enter into our national dialogue and our landscape in a way that I think everybody felt. And there's in the circles where art is being curated and created, we've always known that power exists. But I think in that moment, what Amanda Gorman did is show that there is a way that we can bring beauty to the forefront. And you hear us talk about this on Lab, the podcast, all the time. But in the Enlightenment, we switched that beauty, good, true was reversed to true, good, and beautiful. And so we started to get super excited about thinking about what is true, which is important, right? But the reality is when you sit down to a beautiful meal, you look at it because you're drawn to it because it's beauty. You don't look at these flowers and immediately think about what the actual chemical or DNA makeup of that thing is. Some of you might. But the first thing that moves us is beauty. And then beauty helps us discover what is good and then know what is true. And so to all the parents who have emerging artists, the power of art and artists to bring us into goodness and truth, you have an incredibly high calling and you've nurtured that well. You have been writing and praying and thinking and being aware that hunger exists. That's not just here though. You recently went on a pilgrimage in a totally different part of the world. Were the conversations around those tables and those spaces, was there that same hunger that we feel here?
Absolutely. And it was really surprising because I got a last minute invitation to this pilgrimage. I didn't know anyone except one person in the group of us 16. And we made our way through the trails of the Scottish countryside. And at every turn, especially after lunch, we'd get into this cadence where they would turn and say, could we hear a poem? And then it just became every day. And then it became throughout the traveling. And it was really a way of connecting us to our experience and reaching up and higher and deeper as we walked through. I told my son, I said, hey, I really would love to show you this Scottish countryside. It's so gorgeous. And he said to me, I don't know, Mom, I'm not really into religious walking.
Is there any other kind?
I was like, I don't know. What do you think we're doing? Like we have like the robes but part of our religious walking was to connect to our surroundings and our experience through poetry. And it was beautiful to me to see 15 total strangers, lovely people, beautiful people, hungering for poetry. It was so lovely. Yeah.
When it's even the cadence, we talk about poetry being musical and that there is a musical cadence to it. It's part of what makes it alluring, right? It's beautiful and it draws us in, not just with the words you choose, but the cadence and the voice. And I think walking, right? There's a great book, 3 Mile an Hour God, that talks about the reality that walking engenders this ability and capacity to be open and receptive and to hear things that we wouldn't if we're driving 70 miles an hour. And so I think religious walking is a thing, right? Like, is there any other way Jesus walked, right? Ask Kanye. There you go. All right. So here's what I want to know. Ada Limon.
Yeah.
I heard her say she just is for poetry. And so there's all these forms of poetry. There's TikTok poets and Instagram poets and people making and trying to explore because we're hungry for life and beauty. Right. How do you approach writing? I mean, would you say I'm a classically trained poet? How do you describe yourself as a poet?
That's so hard because I feel like I'm one of those people that I'm easily inspired. I really enjoy multiple genres and styles. I love getting my hands into something I've never done, like writing a villanelle. There's a villanelle in the book. There's a sonnet.
You have to tell us what that is.
Okay. Well, it has this many lines and they repeat. It's just more of the classical structures of poetry. But I feel like even when I was in school as a creative writing major, I wasn't taught any of the classical forms and structures. I had to teach myself. I remember going home and looking at The Raven with its and trying to copy how the lines braked and where they rhymed because it's not really taught as much anymore. I mean, in some places, but I feel like we've gone so contemporary, so free verse that it's hard to find. You kind of have to find your way through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's why I'm so excited about Alchemy of Praise. And if you are in the room or you're listening to this podcast and poetry is new to you or it's in your collection, it's like the underappreciated part of your collection, I just want to encourage you to return back to it because the poet has this ability to speak not just in words, but the arrangement on the paper, right? The way the white space plays with the way that poem is laid out. the musicality, the structure. And I think what you have done really beautifully in Alchemy of Praise is take some of that classical form, but allow for a poem like Smoke. You'll find Smoke. It's my favorite. I don't know why, but Smoke is within this Alchemy of Praise, and it is a brief but potent poem. And you'll find something like that in here, and it'll just draw you in. So I want to talk a little bit about Alchemy of Praise, and let's start at the top. You chose that title. Tell us about Alchemy of Praise, and as you thought about curating this collection, why was that the title that you chose?
Yeah, I thought about that. I thought we're probably going to talk about the title, and I did put a definition of alchemy on the back of the book, just for clarity's sake. There are a couple of definitions out there. And I when I first was thinking about the title, I just thought, what are my favorite words? Because everyone has favorite words, and woven is a favorite word. Alchemy is a favorite word. So I kind of just landed on a favorite word. And then I realized that really all of my poetry, I think at the root of it, there's some praise that is either imbuing it or rising up out of it, or it's turning back to it. So it seemed to go, yeah.
Well, I think when you said the title, we were excited about it. And you were cautious because you thought, will people understand what I am trying to communicate? And I think there couldn't be a better title, because transforming or transmuting, taking the ordinary thing and making it into something other. That's what art we always say it's the beauty, good, true, transcendentals, they point beyond themselves. And they take what is ordinary and they remind us that there's an extraordinary essence behind those things that we have come to know as ordinary. And we get to, as Lewis said, re-enchant them. He talks about that on bikes. The fact that the first time you ride a bike, you're just, as a kid, it's magic, right? And then that bike eventually is laid over on its side and it's not ridden and you forget about it. And then sometime later in life, you walk back by that bike and you remember what it was like to ride it. And you get back on that bike and you're soaring again like a child. You've done that in Alchemy of Praise, taking these ordinary things and transmuting them, turning them in a way that just welcomes us in. It's beautiful.
That's great. Well, yeah, and we talked about this too, that alchemy is this, well, on the back, a power or process that changes or transforms something in a mysterious or magnificent way. And God is doing that to each one of us every day. And so there's all these layers of meaning, I think, in that word. Yeah.
And I think, again, the power of poetry, what you've done is helping us re-access a part of even the way God wired our brains to work, right? We think about right and left hemisphere, and we've just underutilized that gift that God has given us. And so you do that, again, on the page, you do that with the words, but you also partnered with a really wonderful artist who is live here in the room. Sarah Cisco is right over there. Sarah, say hi. For everybody who's not, we're going to say more about that, and you're going to have a chance to meet Sarah in a second. But you said, I want to include visual art. I don't just want a cover for the sake of a cover. I want the cover to be a part of the story that I am telling and what I'm curating. And the cover art is absolutely beautiful, Sarah, and it does allure and draw you in. What did you take to Sarah to get her imagination running?
I think her imagination is running all the time.
Doesn't need help.
I just run beside it. I loved her work. I've seen other collage pieces that she's done. She did one for one of her husband's work events, and then also for Blick, and just different. I would see them and I would just be really moved by all of the storytelling she's able to do with such a small amount of space. I also love the torn edges and kind of that energy that it creates when it comes together. So I was already looking at her collages, and then I can't remember the moment where she was, like, well, hey, what if we tried one for your book? And then, hey, this is cool. And I don't even know at that moment when it happened. It was very organic, but I love her work. So I feel like it was just a natural fit. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the collage, and you chose warm tones, and there's this beautiful, there's a warmth to it, but there's these cool aspects that are surrounding. I mean, it's beautifully, beautifully done. And I love Frederick Buechner on Art says artists call us to pay attention. And even the collage, what you've hidden within this, you can't walk past it and not go, what is that? And why is that there? And so for a few lucky people, there are a few actual prints in the room here at Buddy Brew on Kennedy. So Sarah's brought some of those with her. But the title, Alchemy of Praise, the cover art that invites us to look a little bit deeper. And then there's a structure to the book as well. Tell us a little bit about what you'll find when you open the book and the structure that you chose.
Well, I think this was you and I collaborating on a vision up, vision in, vision out structure. And it took a while for that to sort of form and mesh. And we thought, well, maybe if you had some pictures introducing the chapters, that would be a real natural kind of, way of moving through those 3 points of vision. And I really love the way it came together. So that's essentially, it's the VUVIVO vision as a structure in the book to kind of collect the poetry. The book starts out where the vision goes up, and it's contemplations, it's prayers, the heart is orienting upward, and then it moves into the interior spaces where the human heart. I mean, this is a whole world in here. I'm always saying that on the podcast because poets are really, really good at giving language to this inner world. And so there's that transformation and that awareness on the inside that the second section is exploring. And then the third section, vision out. How do we take that vision up, that awareness of what God is doing in here, and then how does it go out into the world? Yeah. And so I feel like that made a nice natural division of sections. And it's an honor to also, be putting forward the 3 V's. Yeah. Yeah.
It was fun to talk about it. Yeah. And then to see when you chose that will work. Yeah. And it does create space for prayers. It creates space for lament, for tears. Right. It creates space for laughter and joy and all the fleshy things that are part of our life as well. And Gregorios is here, a music composer and beautiful, beautiful artist in his own right. He and I were talking about just the universal things and the universal emotions. We're working on a symphony project at V3. And that idea that there is an ontological, or there's a reality to our transcendent dimension. Like you can't escape it. Even if we don't confess that there is something invisible beyond, part of our existence says, no, there's something bigger. And so there is an upward reality to life. And but you can't stay there. You don't stay there. We are fleshy and embodied people, incarnational people. And so that inward part is us, and then relational. It is the way of our being. And so you've touched on all of those. Would you read one from the up section?
Sure.
Can we do that?
Yes.
And I threw Wendy the toughest challenge for anybody who said, which is your favorite song or poem? I said, I don't want to choose for you. Just choose one that you want to share tonight from the up section. We'll start there.
Okay. I am going to, I'm going to choose one that I read along the pilgrimage because that experience is still new and fresh to me. And this is one that I have pretty much memorized, which has made it easy to take along with me on the trails. And I just want to share it with you guys. It was really impactful to me over the summer. It's called Day Unto Day. Into the void crashed waves of light. The day you spoke to darkest night. Father of rain, mother of dew, one who spun the expanse of blue. Teach me to read deeply the skies, open my ears, baptize my eyes. Earth turned as a thought in your mind, matter and space and time combined in your hands, oh master of spheres, whose grace molds and upholds my years. Whirl me, shape me, hand over clay, night unto night, day unto day. Yeah? Okay, keeps going. It keeps going. Do you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
Oh, okay. I was like, in all things your glory is found. Wordlessly the heavens resound. Poet of wing, of wind, of flight, who paints an arc with rain and light, Take my vision where eagles dwell, that I might know your poem well. In the silence, creation sings. Symphonies sound in Saturn's rings. Maker of moons that peak and hide, artist of stars and planets flung wide. Bathe me in gold, clothe me in light. Let my life speak to darkest night.
It's beautiful. You can clap again. Yeah.
That's fun.
There is like, for those who know me, I'm a Gerard Manley Hopkins fan, and I like the grandeur of God and that musicality.
Yeah.
We get to do this regularly because we have Wendy's on our podcast regularly, just irrigating the desert with poetry. And so I want to do this a little bit live. We won't do as much as we normally do, but just talk a little bit about this poem in particular and how you constructed it to get to that moment where you make that turn at the end where you touch back to what you started with.
Yeah. I actually, this poem started out as a song, and I think it has that lyrical, galloping, iambic, motion that makes it fun to recite out loud. But this actually came to me right after a V3 meeting, when I had a team meeting one night, and we were talking about beauty, and we were talking about God's grandeur, and this just came out, the first draft of this, after a meeting. So this is inspired by Zach Elliott here. I have to I like that about this poem too. So yeah, you guys know that song, So Will I? Right? I think there's something about starting out, this whole poem starts with, you spoke to darkest night. Your words sent light, energy, the sun, candles, all light came in that moment. And then I think one of the most beautiful aspects of walking with God is that we get to then have that light inside of us shining and radiating back out into the darkness. And so it takes you on that journey that I think, if you think of Genesis and how this all was created, it's so glorious. And it is one big poem. I mean, you have codes of earth and sky. You have codes of wind. You have, again, the wind. It's so poetic. And it's so masterful. And I think taking time to meditate on that is really special.
Yeah.
This is a really enchanted, special, beautiful, poetic God we serve. Yeah.
No, I love that. Even you hear us use the language of enchanted reality often, and that we want to share the life and beauty of the gospel with the world by uncovering enchanted reality. And that's what we're touching on, is that we are not in a cold vacuum of space. Right. If you think about space versus cosmos, and this thing that's just charged and pregnant with life and beauty and meaning and significance, that story has been little by little by little eroded, especially in Western civilization, to the point that we feel disenchanted. And we walk down and we're technologically advanced, we're well connected, we're experiencing incredible advancements in science and medicine and all of these areas, and yet we feel sad. And we feel very much alone. And I heard Post Malone's new album, and he mentions, just a guy spinning on a rock, and it's a sad song. And I thought that idea that I'm alone spinning on a rock, like, that is the felt experience of so many people. And then a poet comes along and says, no, in the silence, there isn't emptiness, but there is silence, and there's a symphony in Saturn's rings. And if we'll give our attention to it, you will know that day after day, right, the heavens are pouring out their speech, and they don't use a word, but it's saturated. It is enchanted. And as soon as we come back to that, you've drawn our vision back up. And that's what enchants our toast and our coffee and our wine and our words and our neighbors, because we can't look at them as mere mortals anymore, because the entire thing is charged with significance. I love this poem. Yeah. We could go on. This is like a meal where somebody brings you something and you taste it and you're like, oh, that's so good. We could just stop right there. But I want to ask you to take us to Vision Inn, and just to show the contrast. Like, that took us way up into the cosmos and into the rings of Saturn. And then you can bring us all the way from there right down into the moments of our day.
That's awesome. Let's see, what did I... Okay. So I might read two just because the one I thought of is really short, and then there's one next to it that I love too. So there. Short enough. So this is The Spark. This starts off the second chapter. Where does it come from? The spark that ignites synapses to wire commands for sinew and bone to harness the wind, to make a cage of fingers around the smallest living things, to write it all down. Weightless. Countless migratory birds cruise into the Florida sun, weaving a whimsical canopy above as I plunge into a cool shock of blue. I shoot through soothing resistance, trailing roaring ripples, and dive under to find myself surrounded by ribbons of refracted light, hundreds of rainbows pulsing along the underwater walls. I release an endless exhale, sending a dream of fingertips to brush playfully over my cheeks. I turn to rest, to drift on the quiet surface. Sun soaks my boundaryless skin. My name floats. The flag draws me into its undulations. My name floats among feathers riding soft thermal currents. I am weightless, wrapped in silk, and burdens have no bones to carry them. Soon I will emerge. Heavy feet will mark their temporary outlines across the cement. Countless pixels glowing in liquid crystal will hook the eyes and drag it all down. Skin like iron, I will burn with infinite impulses until the flight of birds breaks into my chest, tracing patterns on my tongue as I plunge once more into wonder.
It's beautiful.
It's fun.
I love The Spark. I immediately, images are coming to mind, but I want to focus on Weightless because I'm watching Riley watch our time. Weightless. Help us understand that. I mean, you hear that turn. I have the advantage of seeing these on the page, but you were deliberately carrying us into a particular moment there.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I love the feeling of water. I love how God gave us this way of breaking from the familiarity it just changes your whole orientation to your body, to gravity, to your world. Everything changes, and swimming is the closest thing to flying. And I think there's something about it that makes me feel like I am so light that there's nothing to carry here. There's no thoughts or there's no burdens. There's nothing wrong in the world. And I love that God gives us that moment. It's almost like a baptism. And then you come up out and you're back and it's hard and it's heavy and now your vision is going back down again. And so the water tends to be a place where I reset and just kind of, shake off that familiarity. Yeah.
That fog of familiarity is something that Malcolm Guite thought a lot about. He's another poet, and that it settles in on us to the point that our feet feel heavy, like you said. And I think that's another thing I love about poetry is the invitation to engage ordinary things. And we have the benefit of living by the Gulf of Mexico. Within 40 minutes, depending on traffic, we can get at least from here to there, and you can lay back.
And this was at the JCC, so now there's less excuse.
Yeah. You have a pool, you have the Gulf of Mexico, and we just forget. We just reflected on unused chairs, right?
Yeah.
Chairs that we don't sit in anymore. And I think that's the power of poetry. When you were writing Alchemy of Praise, who were you hoping would find their way to this? How do you think about that? Because when you write a book of prose, or you have an audience in mind, but poetry can be so broad. There's an invitation for everybody. Who are you hoping might pick this up?
I think you're right about poetry, how it differs from prose a little bit in that audience-minded way. I think mine was more general. I wanted to write poetry that was accessible, that wasn't so tough and terse and difficult to get into. I want to just not be so cryptic that people feel like they're doing homework. Like you hand them a poetry book, they're like, homework. So that was more of a broad, general, I think, vision. But because poems tend to download and they're just little inspiration, you just you get the inspiration and then you write, and you don't really know who you're writing to until you see it all come together. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And the idea that we know this is going to end up on a bookshelf. And this is what I love about poetry is our lives are not static. There's movement. And tonight we are in this room, this podcast will be listened to years from now, and somebody is going to be in a moment that they didn't know they would be in when they picked up the book. And this is one of the things I love about poetry. I will go in a moment where I am in deep grief or in celebration, and I will not have language for what I'm feeling in that moment. And prose is too much. I can't get there. I don't have the time, but I'll take poetry off the shelf and I will just sit down and I will find my way. And within pages, there is someone there helping me find language for a feeling that I didn't know that I would need to have language for. And so I love that you wrote in the way that you did, because Alchemy of Praise is accessible. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know, I have not approached poetry, or when I did, I felt kind of ashamed. I mean, it can honestly, this is me in math class.
Calculus.
I would sit there and just go, I don't know what we're talking about. I'll do my best to pretend. And then grades came and they were like, that guy has no idea what he's talking about. Yeah, I was thinking about poetry. But it can feel intimidating to the point that I go, I don't want to go down that road because I almost feel dumb reading it because I don't understand. What you have done in Alchemy of Praise is written with depth and cadence and musicality and beauty, but you have made it accessible so that we can enter into it and discover that we too love poetry. And that is a masterful gift. That is a difficult thing to do, and you did it. So beautifully done.
Thank you so
done.
much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
We can clap. Just clap it.
Thank you.
It's good. All right. I know we're getting to the point where we want to do a Q&A, but I have to ask you, just to help educate us, when you think about collecting poetry at home, obviously Alchemy of Praise is going to be on every shelf in every home in America and around the world. But in addition, if you could give some encouragement to all of us who are in this conversation, and maybe we weren't before, but Alchemy of Praise has now kind of transformed our bookshelf and made it something more enchanting than it maybe was before. And we're going to clear some space. Who are some other poets that you could point us to that would maybe help us access poetry in the same way that you've done it?
I mean, the first one is Malcolm Guite. You probably have heard of him. He's incredible. Again, I find him extremely accessible. And I was just telling someone else the other day, when he shoots a video of himself reading poetry, something he's working on, he lives in Oxford, and he talks like this, and he uses like this long pipe, and he has this long white beard, and there's books all everywhere, and port and brandy, and he just sits back like in his Gandalf mode and reads the most exquisite poetry. So if you love verse, if you love poetry that speaks about the things of God and the wonders of this world in a not cryptic, not difficult to enter into way, he's fantastic. So be my first one.
Yeah, I love that. Malcolm Guite is great.
Yeah.
And, yeah. I think that's what I'm so excited about Alchemy of Praise, is that there are Guites in the world who they're just seasoned poets in the modern era. Yeah. And then we have the Hopkins and these other folks that they're mountains that we look at. And we need modern poets who are writing with the depth and insight and vision of a visible and an invisible world. And so you belong right there with Geit and Alchemy of Praise, and Kieffer will be right there on the shelf as well. It's beautiful.
I have to get a pipe.
That's
I guess.
Right. Get a pipe.
My own pipe.
Good. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I said, you know what? If I could just do anything I wanted with no health concern, because if you know me, you know I'm a little bit of a health person. I was like, I would smoke a pipe. That's what I would do.
Definitely.
And I just can't.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
My inner self.
Don't listen, kids.
That's right.
I don't.
It's good. Hey, take us to Vision Out. I think that's a great way to kind of move out and get into this Q&A. But this outward section that we've contemplated and looked up and felt in, take us out.
Okay. I'm going to choose one that you chose. This is Van Gogh or Van Gogh. I don't say that right. I just got back from Europe. I need to pronounce it correctly. It's not the luminous pears, green skin awash in first love, framed in suspension of decay, or the holy soul of a boot dripping with all I've ever wanted to be. It's not the passion in the sunflowers, those stocky, wide-faced forms stroked like lovers' hair, gratefully. It's not the rage in the pupils or the burdens hanging on the mouths. It's not even the scintillating stars singing praise, the roiling eruptions of light, the loneliness of beauty, or the tragedy of obscurity. It's her eyes. They caught me off guard. My soul still shakes, the distance between her suffering and mine erased.
So beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous poem.
That's you chose that one.
Wait, you wrote that one. That's all I did is discover it. That was beautiful, beautiful. That's a story. Tell us the story behind the poem.
It's just admiring this beautiful painter and his life story, and really just that moment when you realize that you connected so profoundly, and the distance between us is eroded. We are the same human going through a human experience. That same pain is shared and somehow alleviated because you've shared it. It's so profound. And he had this way of painting the essence behind things, speaking about unveiling the enchantment, the energy of everything. It almost seemed like I could touch that when I looked at his paintings. And so I had to just try and give him honor.
Yeah, I think you did well.
Good.
If you've seen Van Gogh's work, there's a disturbing nature to it in the sense that it disrupts and troubles the water a bit.
Yes.
And we need that. And I think that madness that was there, that burden that he carried, it helps us because we all carry it in some way. We have those moments that we feel that deeply, and the water is that troubled. And visually, he allows us. But you erased that space between beautifully, and I love how it lands right there elegantly. Nice. Wendy, this is beautiful work.
Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, congratulations. Alchemy of Praise is a tremendous contribution to poetry, and to modern poetry. I would say it's an elevated contribution that recaptures something of the depth and musicality and structure of poetry, but does it in a way that presents it for all of us in this moment of disenchantment who are hungry and thirsty and ready for someone to irrigate that desert of our soul and awaken something in us. And Wendy's done it beautifully. So here's what I want to ask you to do. If you're listening to the podcast, please, obviously, go find Alchemy of Praise. It's on all the platforms. You can find it, order it, send it to your home. I would ask that you would also just share this, because we're in a moment right now where, as I said, there is a place on a bookshelf for poetry. I have poetry next to my bed. I have poetry in every bag that I carry, because there are these moments where we need to be welcomed into those deeper spaces of the soul. And the quick play is to our phones. And a simple way that we can kind of put tension and counterbalance that is to put something as accessible. And even when we talked about the structure and the depth, the dimension of the book, we said this needs to be something that you can slip quickly into a backpack or something to carry with you. And that's the magic of poetry. It travels, it pilgrims, it walks with us. And there's going to be moments where you're at Buddy Brew on Kennedy having a cup of coffee and waiting for rain to pass, and you find smoke, and it surprises you and does something beautiful. Wendy, thank you for giving us that gift. Thank you for sharing the life and beauty of the gospel with the world in such an extraordinary way. We're proud of you. We're excited for you, and we can't wait to sing the praises of Alchemy of Praise. So congratulations.
Thanks, Zach. Thank you. Thank you.